Okay, Matt, we are now live. We're just going to wait for a couple of seconds here while the numbers go up. We have 36 people so far. Hi, everyone. You can't say anything. So, hi, Ken. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Marco. Joining in the chat. Oh, we already have a question, Matt.
You haven't said anything yet.
I think that's the reason. Okay, we're going to get this started. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex McLean. I'm the CEO of Alvéole, the urban beekeeping company that installs hives on rooftops and buildings in cities across North America, with the goal to reconnect people to nature. And that's going to be the topic today. We're going to kind of talk about the engagement that can happen with hives and what really these projects are about. And so I have Matt Cruz here that's with me today. He's the head of corporate social responsibility at Groupon, and he's based in Chicago. Thanks so much, Matt, for being here with us today.
You're very welcome, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, everyone who's joined. Just kudos to your team. I'll say Alvéole without the French accent. I know I'm not doing it justice, but it's been a real pleasure working with you guys in preparation for this webinar, as well as just over the past year working with your Chicago team. They're just a real joy to work with. A real bunch of engaging folks who know a lot about bees and beekeeping as well as other things, I'm sure. But we tend to focus on just the beekeeping part with them. So, but thank you.
Well, thanks for those very kind words. I'm very excited to be speaking to you because what you guys have done last year with the beekeeping project at Groupon has been really amazing, right? The more I hear about it, the more it just fits exactly what we try to do with these projects. And we're going to dive into all of that stuff, everything you've done with it. But on a communication and a marketing stand front, the stuff you guys have done is really amazing. And so hopefully, some people that are listening today might be thinking about doing these projects in the near future, or maybe some already have bees and are looking to kind of grow the project and make it better. Matt's a very good example of taking this project and make it really complete, and using humor but based on the scientific information of the hive and passing that on to employees. And so there's really cool stuff that's happened, and we're going to kind of dive into those different things today. But before we get into that, let's start from the very beginning and kind of bring everything back.
Sure.
How did this project start? How did you get interested in urban beekeeping in Alvéole? And how did this kind of get going at Groupon at the very beginning? And we're talking this was early 2019, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I will. And real quick, Groupon as a company has been around for about 11 years or so, and we're based in Chicago. So quick level set, I guess you can probably see in the background there. That is not me with the hat and the sleeve of bees. That is Travis, I believe, our contact. But the beautiful skyline of Chicago. And, I would say we started on this project about, you said early 2019. So, I get, and it's not because of me, but just in the industry, you get probably hundreds of, sales type pitches for products and services on an annual basis. And I can't respond to all of them. And for some reason, this one, and this is kudos to your sales team, I guess, this one sort of struck me as really interesting and almost too simple. I kept asking, I think it was Ian on your team,
Yes.
I said, what's the catch? Like I give a little bit of money and, we get bees on our roof. And so that's obviously the benefits from an environmental standpoint, pollination of local food and flora, helping the urban bee population just felt like a really cool idea. But I told them right away, I said, we don't own our building in Chicago. So Sterling Bay is a big building management company, property management company. And I said, I kind of use that as a little bit of a caveat. Just said, if they say no, then, I got to kind of kill the idea and we can't really meet with you. But, he came back right away with like, they said yes. And I said, well, now I guess I got to meet with you. So, we had a meeting with our facilities team, and I think the initial reaction was like, really, bees on the roof? And like, we have a common area space up top, where employees of our company and other companies can hang out. It's a really cool space. And I think once we got past the initial sort of concerns of like, well, safety of employees, but almost as much safety of the bees from employees, someone just knocking over a box of bees seemed like trouble. Once we got past that, it was kind of an easy sell. It was somewhat low risk, and what we felt was like high reward for what we do, especially from an SR perspective. So we're really about sort of being hyper local and taking small things and making really cool stories out of them, and using that as sort of to justify our social impact and demonstrate our social impact. So that was kind of the story. And then in the time that we've worked with your team, the beekeepers, so that was Shelby and Travis, just every time we interacted with them, whether it was with employees or it was just, my team sort of on the rooftop doing just wellness checks, so to speak, as I call them, on the bees. It was just an amazing learning experience, and one that we sort of as a team kind of used as like almost weekly updates at our team meetings. So it was a lot of fun. And so that was the start, and that was the story of how it all came together.
I mean, I think you're kind of downplaying it now. I know in hindsight it was probably you see now all the benefits that come out of it, but I'm sure there was a bit of complexity of going to the upper management and getting them to kind of agree to the idea.
Sure.
How, for those of maybe that are listening and are wondering, okay, this idea sounds cool. It sounds like there are benefits, but what is my CEO going to say? What is my CFO going to say? What are these people going to say? What was your kind of way to get through that? Right?
Yeah, so we had a couple things that were a benefit to us. This won't be the case for everybody. I mean, the one thing I already addressed was the kind of ownership of property. So if you're at a company or an organization where you don't own the building, that's obviously a little trickier. And in that case, we didn't. But at the same time, I think so that aside, once you get that part taken care of, and I think your team does a great job of sort of building the case for and the benefits of having that in place. And there's so many more examples of buildings and corporations and property managers doing that now that didn't used to do that. So listen, Groupon's a company that we've in our lifespan, we're kind of built on doing things that are kind of quirky deals, fun workplace. And so, you walk in the front door of our office on the 4th floor at 600 West Chicago, and we have probably the size of a small truck, a spaceship that is inside of it like a stuffed animal cat head. And so when you start with that as like when you walk in our building, like bees on the rooftop really isn't such a big deal. And it helped that our CEO at the time had in his family, I think his father-in-law is in the beekeeping industry, believe it or not. So I think there was a bit of that makes sense kind of factor for what we are and what kind of company we are, like bees on the rooftop. And then that's, layer on top of that the benefits that come with it. And it just, we've got a little bit of freedom, as operators, managers in the company. Like when you have your budget, you got freedom to kind of, move quickly, make decisions, fail fast, and then this one felt like, worst case scenario, we can send the bees off for adoption if this doesn't work out. But, it worked out great. And it was not a hard sell, believe it or not. So I think it was okay, that sounds like us. So.
Okay. Oh, well, that's great to hear. And by the way, the property management company that you're talking about, Sterling Bay, once we approached them, they said yes, but they also said yes to 2 other buildings. So they were kind of excited also by you guys getting on the project and getting it done elsewhere. So it shows really once someone kind of takes the plunge the way you did and saw this as an idea that was really interesting, others kind of followed suit. We're going to dive a little bit into what you did kind of to build that experience during the year, because As some of you are going to learn, the whole goal of these beekeeping projects isn't just about putting the hives on a roof and ticking a box and saying that's done. The goal is to have people interact with those hives or interact with beekeepers that are taking care of those hives. And we sometimes see that as something that's very, have to be physically on site. And you guys did a lot of cool stuff that is kind of remote, which I think is interesting in these times. I'm just going to share my screen here for a second. What you see here is the Groupon MyHive page. And this is not an initiative that you did, but this is going to set kind of the table for the rest of this. But this is a page where people can go in and see what's going on live with the hive. And so here's a photo from the roof. My favorite part here is that you actually have the estimated number of bees and the miles that they have traveled today. So we try to do an estimate of how far the bees are going in order to gather nectar. And every visit that we do, we actually update this section on the right called inspection sheet so that people can see what's going on inside the hive. The blue frames here are brood, which is young babies or young larvae, and the other ones are honey frames. And so this is kind of our commitment to making things more remote. You see here, so the Groupon hives are kind of just north of downtown, and you can see the flying range, so where the bees are actually foraging. And so this is our kind of initiative of doing this. But you guys went further and really pushed kind of the whole. You guys did a really interesting newsletter. I'm just going to grow that here a little bit so you can see it a little bit bigger. This is what I was talking about here. So the number of miles traveled, and down here the flying range. Sorry to make that bigger at the beginning.
Yeah.
But as I said, that was kind of just the initial our commitment to that. But then you did a ton of cool stuff. One of them is you kept a newsletter on basically everything that was happening with the hives at every inspection, and I think things that we were saying just at passing, you kind of made into a whole story. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about what happened and how you were building that newsletter
Sure.
every couple
Yeah,
of
I
weeks.
think a few people have asked to make the screen maybe the two of us bigger, which I think if you do that, they'll realize quickly they don't want that. At least on my side, but yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, the tools and the dashboard that you provided for us was fantastic. The biggest thing being that that kind of cool little section about the number of bees, how far they've traveled. I think you have the ability to add a camera to that rooftop space, which we don't do, but there's that opportunity as well. But yeah, for us, everything is about storytelling, especially when it comes to from the social responsibility perspective. We feel like we're not doing our jobs properly. And just for perspective, my team, the social responsibility team, sits under the comms sort of PR function of the company. So it is a benefit to us to be partnering really closely with that team, which we do, to help tell our story. And whether it's funding of a particular focus area for us, like food insecurity, or simply just something we feel kind of environmental and fun, like the beehive. We use that as an opportunity to really kind of dig in to this. And I don't remember how it started exactly. In fact, actually, I do. Our first sort of announcement of the beehive came with this naming competition. So we asked employees and gave employees the opportunity to name the queen bee. We thought it would be a really fun sort of way. We're a company that kind of built on like incentivizing and gamifying, competitions like this, friendly competitions with things like stickers and T-shirts. Our employees love sort of homemade designed stickers to put on the back of their laptops and things like that. And it was just a fun way to kind of like, hey, let's come up with a name. And we got dozens and dozens of name submissions for the queen bee. And we kind of went from there. Once we got a name, which was Debbie, kind of very sort of common and simplistic in the queen, from a queen's name perspective, but it felt fun. By the way, my other favorite name submissions were Queen Labifa, very timely Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and for those of you that enjoy Golden Girls, B. Arthur was another one that didn't make the final cut. But we ended up going with Debbie, and from there, like, this sounds stupid, but she was a character and she was a person in this storyline, and we kind of continued from there. Every opportunity that came up for there to be a new, Travis or Shelby would come by and do a check. At one point, there was a thought that Debbie had left the hive, so a super procedure, I believe it's called, and the bees were maybe trying to take over the hive, and she didn't, and we kind of played on this whole sort of, it felt very HBO sort of mini series sort of feel, Game of Thrones like. But it was, oh yeah, here you go. That was the update, is that she was able to kind of thwart the takeover, and employees loved it.
Yeah. I want to read this, Matt, because I think it's a really cool way to put it. And for those of you that know about beekeeping, there's a lot of technical terms in here, but the team at Groupon has kind of packaged it really nicely. So the update is, despite the overwhelming approval of the new name of their queen, there was some serious drama going on in the hive. A coup was attempted when another egg was laid, nurtured with royal jelly, and left to grow into a new queen. Debbie was not happy. This process is called supersedure, the attempt by the hive to replace an ailing, ill, or missing queen. Fortunately, Debbie is none of these things, so her competition was squashed with the help of Travis, our attending beekeeper. And then it says face hidden to protect Travis from retaliation. And that's the photo where conveniently Travis's head has been cut off to make sure that the queen can't find him, I guess. But I thought that was really cool, so I just wanted to read that.
Yeah, so I'll stop there just to say that the point of it all is that for making this into a story was really important to kind of carrying on the narrative of why this hive was there, but also having fun with it and make it a way that was super engaging for employees, which I think kind of continued on into some of the in-person and recorded workshops that we then conducted later that come with part of their Shelby working on the hive. And I will say, like, it was super amazing to just be, when we make these rooftop visits, they were, I think Matt, another gentleman named Matt who's on our team that does a lot of the creative, we'd bring him up every time we had a rooftop visit, and he would take pictures, and but then they would let us all, you could basically hold that board of bees. And I don't know, there's something, I never felt sort of more safe than when you're up there. Sort of, it's a really cool thing to just kind of be around them and have the process of what the bees are doing, whether it's that when they first open up the hive and there's that sort of tornado effect that happens when they're basically sort of feeling out their surrounding areas, that tornado of bees. It's a pretty astounding sort of natural occurrence that happens that, you just don't see at work on a daily basis. So
sounds like you learned a couple of things.
Tornado and bees.
Someone's asking, where was the newsletter conveyed? Only around the office, or was it sent? I know you put publicly on the Groupon website, I think, but was there? Yeah.
Yeah. So we our intranet essentially is called Skynet, and the intranet, we have a social responsibility. A lot of departments and teams have their own blogs within that intranet page, and so we have our own page where we would update, but we also would include these updates in some all volunteer emails. So we have a pretty large distro of I'd say probably 2/3 of our company is on our volunteer distro. So it's as close as you can get to like an all company email. And then we also posted a lot of the information about the bees on our sort of community facing page. So our external facing community blog, where we update a lot of our sort of activity for an external audience. So with small tweaks, but for the most part, about the same thing.
Okay, cool. I want to talk about workshops because I was telling you earlier, the goal of these projects is not just about the hive; it's about that engagement. So newsletters is something great, and the team seems to have really kind of gotten behind that. We can read some other things that I've posted here that we can look at after, but other little texts that you guys came up with, which I think are brilliant. But then there's the workshop part of things too, which is more something that we offer kind of standard in our services. But I know you did a remote version of that workshop with Shelby that's seen on the screen here that was taking care of the hives. I think just for people that are listening, what did you do with workshops? What was kind of the general feel from employees? How did they participate? I have a couple of photos. Oh,
Yeah, we can get rid of that.
I think we should.
Your beekeepers are often they bring they bring the they bring the hats not for themselves but just for dorks like me to put on their head and.
So for those of you wondering, this is Matt Cruz. He's the head of corporate social responsibility at Groupon, also beekeeper on the weekend. No, I have photos here of the workshop. So maybe you can tell us more about those and how.
Sure. So yeah, we did 2 workshops last year. One of them was not this workshop, but it was called Discovery. I got the name written down. It's which workshop is that? The Discovery Bees.
Discover the world of bees.
Right. And that one was one that we did more. I mean, it was very well attended, and we do these a lot. These types of workshops, lunch and learns, things like that, because it's just a way to raise awareness about what we do as a company. So many departments do them, but we do them especially for our social responsibility work, especially when we can involve our nonprofit partners. And so it's just a great way to raise awareness. So the one that the Discover workshop, the very first one, was absolutely just packed, and that one was very much virtual because we have several offices around the world, but we also have in the U.S. 4 or 5 different offices, and it's just a way for them to kind of zoom in. I think we used Zoom for those, or just use that. We have sort of a fixed sort of Zoom within our Skynet platform or intranet platform, and so Shelby ran one of those, and that one of the great things about I think what it did allow our employees to do is just learn more about this world of bees that was just so fascinating, and I think connects them to sort of this. Obviously people want to be connected to sort of this purpose within their company outside of what they do on a daily basis, and so I think getting more information about this isn't just bees on the rooftop. This is what we're helping support, and just sort of the fascinating aspects of this sort of this natural being, this bee. Were really cool. And so it was great to be able to allow employees from across the country to take part in that. The pictures that you're showing are of the second workshop that we ran, which is I think the honey extraction workshop. And that one was very hands-on. And while I do think we did record that, we had I think a Zoom going in the room. That one's much harder to, we had to limit that to I think 30 to 40 individuals because it is so hands-on. You can see people there actually kind of opening the honeycomb, and then it's kind of put into a centrifuge, which you see there on the left, and then ultimately put into that container where people can jar their own honey. And so what came away from that workshop is everybody who's involved. We had maybe 30 to 40 people, and the sign up for that was almost instantaneous. We sent out a Google sheet that allowed people to sign up, and we just watched it. The names kind of pop up, and in a matter of I think about 7 minutes, we had filled up every spot in the workshop. And then at the end of it, people were able to take jars of honey away. We sold additional jars for I think $5 US a jar, which proceeds all went to charity for all of those. And yeah, it was just a really fantastic way. You can see people look really pretty pleased with their experience. And I would say I think there's another couple hands-on opportunities as well, workshops we'll probably try to do. I'm not sure what it'll look like this year. We haven't planned that out yet, but given the circumstances, I'm not sure we can actually do a lot of the hands-on. That's the jar of honey there, the label designed by our creative guy, Matt Panetti. Great work there. And so that label went on every one of those jars and went out to employees who bought them. We had to limit the jars to I think 1 or 2 per employee because it was so popular. And we could have easily sold, we sold probably 75 to 80 jars. We easily could have sold about probably 5 times that many, just based on the number of people that were purchasing.
That's interesting, and I love these photos. They're a really cool way to see the interaction. A question I think that probably people have, and I have really is so what you're saying is that a portion of the year, the first workshop was a bit more virtual, and you had that on Zoom, and you had a record number of people. I was actually speaking to Shelby, and she said she was a little bit overwhelmed with the quantity of people that actually showed up on the Zoom, and so it suddenly turned into this almost this like massive conference where people were turning
Yeah.
into it. Um, what you kind of alluded to this, but what's going to be the direction you're going to take this year or this season with probably a little less people on site? Do you expect to do some other Zoom workshops like that? How are you going to take this project, and is it still relevant to do in this kind of setting of COVID or post COVID?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think ultimately, and so first of all, Shelby, if that concerned her, if she was nervous, like she didn't show it at all. She's truly one of the better presenters I've ever, just in terms of the topic. I've seen lots of TEDx's before, and she could easily do one of those, and you guys should think about possibly doing that. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does, obviously. For sure, we will continue to provide this sort of virtual connection for employees, because I think the one thing we all do know is becoming really apparent really quickly in the people that I talk to, my colleagues, friends who are all kind of at home now, is this sense of, I think that the sense of a company's culture is to a certain extent lost now, because everyone's sort of in their kitchens and their living rooms and their basements and in my case locked in a guest bedroom. And I think that what you don't get now is this connection, not only to your fellow coworkers, but this connection to the things that happen every day at work and that build that great culture, and in particular the great culture we have at Groupon. So I think it's imperative that we take opportunities like this and continue to try to keep them going, so people can still feel that sense of culture and what makes their company a great place to be outside of the people, because we can't be there anymore, no pun intended. So I think for sure we'll continue those when the hive gets back up and running, and I have no doubt in my mind that people are still going to be super interested and fascinated to do them. But just the lunch and learns will be just lunch from home while we learn on a Zoom. So, and I think people are ready to adapt to that if that's what it's got to be.
Yeah. So the key takeaway is that you still have to continue doing these things to kind of still continue building that company culture and not abandon these projects because everyone is home. I've heard that now from
Yeah.
many people. A lot of people. We were on a call yesterday, you and I, and you said, I'm kind of excited to give people an update on the hives and just to give them that information, which it's who would have thought that that was something that was on your mind more than a year ago, right? Oh, I hope I can soon send information about our hives, and so we've got actually quite a bit of feedback from the people that do have hives saying, it's a breath of fresh air to be able to send finally some good information to our employees and stuff that's actually kind of positive and cool. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak for every company. I mean, I know obviously, we're pivoting just like everybody else is, especially when you're a company based on, like, we're building a marketplace for local experiences, and the merchants and the vendors we work with every day are just that, many of them just the neighborhood businesses that are all, struggling and trying to figure out what's next. And as we do that with them, we figure out how to put deals and experiences and things more front and center that are more about what's happening in their homes and or around them, whether it's things in the yard or exercise or e-learning, learning new skills, cooking, things like that. So yeah, it's a brave new world for all of us, and so I think there's this is just one of those things again that I think people need a tangible kind of touchstone to like what they know, what they're used to. I don't know, like I used to always say, like when we'd go up to the rooftop, it's a bit of a, it's a more of a, like an unfinished space. So every time felt like I should be wearing a hard helmet, but we always wanted to bring people up there in small groups just to kind of see it firsthand, because there's just nothing like it. And so now I don't know, maybe that will be more possible now if small groups are all we have in the office, but I hope that there's a time when and I believe that there's a time when we'll get to do that again. So.
For those that don't, I'm just going to show these photos 1 second here. So the hive at Groupon is actually on a bit of a lower level, and employees can actually see it from this patio that's a bit higher up. So from what I understand, this was kind of the case at the very beginning. You had to think of ways to do this kind of remotely because the hives are visible but not accessible
Yeah.
by people. We have
Yeah,
two.
for sure. And about, I'd say it's about I don't know, it's probably about 15, 20 feet above to the left of where Shelby is. There's a bit of a stretch, maybe, 20 feet away, and then up maybe a story and a half. There's a finished rooftop that overlooks the hive itself. And we, to really help with like just spotting it, it's because it's not hard to see, but it might just look like, some workers left behind a box of something, like if you didn't, have a big sign. We added signage that was sort of all season signage covered in plexiglass that you might see at like a zoo or a state park. And it talked all about the bees. It kind of gave a little arrow like bees right there, and then talked all about like the benefit of bees, why they're there. And I wish, I didn't give you guys a picture of that, but we did everything we could just the moment someone got off that elevator at the penthouse, which was the rooftop, to kind of we had another sign that says, bees to the right, and, bees making honey over here. And then you'd walk over and you'd see the larger sign that was affixed to the railing. So that, we did everything in our power to kind of, from the moment people got off an elevator or were in an elevator bay, to let them know that these bees existed in a space and why they were there. And, we happen to have, I know Shelby had mentioned that we had some great flora and flowers and up on our rooftop, as well as a city garden, which is about a block away. I don't think I'd mentioned that to you, Alex. And that was one of the cool things, is that we really felt like those bees were kind of helping with the pollination of like the garden, just nearby, and we were kind of providing them, with a lot of the nectar that they needed in this, the rooftop space as well. So sort of nice connections all around.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that part with the park close by.
Yep.
Um, Before I move to my next question, there's two questions here that are kind of on the, I apologize, on the same topic here, and maybe you, Matt, you can help kind of Kathy here that asked the question. The question is, do the hives have a specific distance that people should stay away? I'm thinking about landscapers cutting the grass around the hive. And then Kathy also asked, are these honeybees able to sting? What was your experience in terms of safety and all that? If you can speak to that
Yeah.
a little bit.
I'm sure you could probably speak. I mean, I'm sure you could speak more to sort of the restrictions and parameters. But I mean, obviously we had plenty of space around there. I don't know the exact answer to like if you were to have this in a common area space, how much distance or kind of protection you would need. What I will say is that what we learned just through the workshops, and what I learned in just being around, I was within, the pictures you see of Shelby and Travis holding those bee boards. I've got another great picture of Matt Panetti on our team holding one himself. Like what I learned was that the bees have no interest in as humans in us, in what we're doing. They're working constantly. So the one thing I did learn was that if they feel threatened, as anybody might, or if they feel like the queen is threatened, then that's where, they would kind of basically throw themselves in front of in front of the bullet, so to speak, because when they sting you, they die, right? So that's not necessarily what their mission is. So unless they feel super threatened. So I don't know that I ever, being around them as much as they were, I never, was concerned at all, and had bees flying all around us, but they were constantly working. I will say, I think I saw Shelby take one to the face one time. But that was simply because in the work that you guys do, sometimes like there's a lot of moving around of the boards and boxes, and some bees obviously do feel threatened and are threatened, without, it's not intentional, but that's just how it is. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. For Shelby and Travis, it seems like getting stung is like taking a sip of water. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference, and so this is some things we have to always explain is there's a big difference working in the hives, and so people have this, conceived idea of a beekeeper that has this big suit and stuff. All the photos that I've shown so far is not really the way that we work, because we work in a much slower process with the bees to not agitate them. We have both hands in the hive at basically all times, so there is the occasional sting for our beekeepers, but that's really for us being really close to the hive. As soon as you are 10 feet away, the way you were probably when you were close to the hive, really there's absolutely no danger. And so a lot of these hives, in this case, it's not really on a tenant patio, but it's really, very close. You guys share that building with other companies
Yep.
too, and it's really, we've had virtually no incidents for clients over those last 7 years that we've set these up. So they're very quite safe. And hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it did come up at one point or another. Just from an HR, from an employee perspective, because you may have employees who have allergies to bee stings. Some of them sometimes are severe. And so that was another reason for making sure that the signage, not only in our building up to the penthouse, was super clear. I wouldn't say that. I think there may have been, because of the flora on our rooftop, they may have seen more bees in the area, but as you learn, that's simply they're working, and so they have no interest in what you're doing. At least these types of bees. So it was that was something we wanted to make clear, and I think for most people that have a severe allergy to something like that, they're in sort of an outdoors mode. Most of the time have their anything they might need, like an EpiPen, with them anyway. So it's more just about making sure that people are aware that it exists and it's not a surprise.
Yeah, and you guys really went ahead, and you were ahead of the curve in terms of communication and making really things transparent and stuff too. I think all employees and people there. So that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, there's two more questions I want to ask you before we end this webinar. One, you just talked about in passing what you did with the proceeds of honey, but I think what you did in terms of selling the honey, and you could talk about what else you did also with the honey, is really quite neat, because you seem to have kind of gone full circle in terms of connecting your team to nature and then using those proceeds to also have a positive impact. So yeah, give us maybe the story on, and what the money was used for, and what happened there.
Yeah, so the proceeds that from the sale of the jars of honey were donated to one of the largest and most storied kind of botanical gardens in the country, but certainly in Chicago, the Garfield Park Conservatory. People are familiar with Chicago. It's in sort of the East Garfield Park neighborhood, which is kind of a near West Side neighborhood. But the conservatory itself is just a gem of a place, a gem of a museum, so to speak, for botanicals. And so we donated the proceeds from the sales of that. But in kind of going a step further, we also gave some of the honey, and this is sort of just based on connections we had through our team. We gave some of the honey to a local brewery, and they made, or are actually in the process of making, a sort of a honey vice beer out of that honey. We're taking that beer, and we're actually we just, in connection to a bar or restaurant that's in our building, we talked to the manager down there, and they agreed to sell the beer when it's done, and they'll donate the proceeds from those sales back to Garfield Park Conservatory. So we're just continuing to kind of use the product itself in as many healthy and creative ways that we can, and then just connecting partners. I think that's another big thing that we try to do as a team, is really kind of having a clear line of sight across, to say different stakeholders sounds very corporate-y, but just different partners in the community. So whether it's the local brewery or the restaurant downstairs, or another nonprofit that could benefit from something and is giving back to the community in sort of a similar environmental way. It was a way for us to kind of, like you said, sort of have this full circle connection.
Yeah. Okay. Great. My final question for you. When we spoke, you said something that I thought was interesting, because a lot of the companies we start working with don't necessarily have a ton of stuff going on in terms of CSR. You definitely have, a structure in place and a lot of stuff coming up. But in terms of the kind of environmental side, what you said is, we knew we weren't going to change the world with the Hive project, but it seemed like a great place to start. And I like that, because that's the way we also see things, is you start with these projects to create a bit of a link with people within the team, see the impacts that they can have, start with positive stuff to eventually grow on that. My question is, do you feel like you've changed Groupon's world in a way since you implemented the Hive project? What were the changes that you saw that got people connected to bees?
Yeah, so you told me that I said that, and that seems very like sort of pragmatic and slash idealistic. And but I say a lot of things I'm told, and I don't always remember. But so great. I'll tell.
Sorry to send that
Yeah.
back to you, but
I think so. Here's the thing, like I got and I'm sure a lot of corporate funders out there have pretty scrappy budgets sometimes, and I think what I think some of us at least in the philanthropic funding world sometimes um, can get caught up doing is trying to, we have a tendency to maybe think a little more macro than maybe we need to, and sometimes that's budgetary. Like you have this big chunk of money and you want to get the most out of it from a social impact perspective, and so I think you're trying to solve just big societal problems with big or bigger dollars, or actually not enough dollars typically. So we I don't want to say we take the reverse approach, but we do tend to try to look at the work that we can do as being like very hyper local. And I think I used that phrase earlier, and certainly what we do as a company. And I think that was maybe what I had in mind when just thinking about, like, we knew, we weren't going to change the world. I mean, environmentally, I knew that, that one hive isn't going to make a difference, but a lot of one hives in a lot of buildings, around the country, and just being a part of that sort of initial tip of the iceberg make a difference and be an example for others. And like I said, like, knowing that there was a garden nearby, knowing that we had, flowers and plants on our rooftop, knowing that, each jar of honey or each hive creates honey that kind of has its own flavoring to a certain extent by the neighborhood that it's in, which is something, if you get a hive, you'll learn, is really just fascinating, and it makes that hyper local piece of it just feel all the more real. So yeah, I don't know if that's as much more of a statement or a comment, I guess, on what, how I think justifying this in a hyper local way makes sense. And I will continue to do work like that. And again, like, one hive is a story that we can tell, and it's one that we, hope to continue to and plan to tell, and in terms of the benefits, like, I don't know that I can tell you, like, if this kind of reduces our carbon footprint, or, how much, vegetation or how much food we actually help to pollinate. I'll leave that to kind of you guys to kind of help crunch those numbers, or at least make estimates. But again, that's a part of the story. And so I think you get enough of those hives, it's gonna that's where big change happens.
yeah, and we've seen a lot of people start out with one hive, and then grow these projects over a 4, 5, 6 year period to eventually set up more, and start setting up green roofs and donate money to research. And so we've seen actually these small projects, as you said, it's the very beginning, but that can then kind of snowball into something quite big, right? Thanks a lot, Matt. This was really interesting, from, I think, all the points of what you've done in terms of the workshops and the remote workshops, in terms of the all the contests and all the communication stuff that you've done, the beautiful labels, the donating the money back to a local charity, to getting the beer done. You guys have really done quite a bit in a year. So I'm actually quite excited to see what you're going to be doing over the next year, because I'm sure you'll have a ton of new ideas.
Yeah.
And I want to invite, I see a couple of questions here. Nicholas asking what type of bee. The type of bee we use is a honey bee. And I want to invite those of you that are interested in seeing maybe inside of a live hive. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be doing a live inspection on our roof here at Alvéole. And so for those of you interested, if you get in touch with us, we can send you that link, and you can actually see what you saw in terms of photos today. I'm actually going to be opening that hive and showing that. So that's happening tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And so if you're interested, please join. Matt, this was really great. Thanks so much for spending the time. And thanks for everyone that joined us today. We'll see you very soon.
Appreciate it. Be well, everyone.
Cheers.